Good afternoon and welcome. The Town of Los Gatos Town Pension and OPEB Trust Oversight Committee of October 15th, 2024 is now called to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Rista?
Here.
Councilmember Ennie?
Here.
Councilmember Moore? Vice Mayor Hudas?
Here.
Mayor Badami?
Here. Our first item on the agenda is the consent items, and this is considered routine town business and may be approved by one motion. Any member of the committee may request to have an item removed from the consent items for comment and action. Members of the public may also pull an item. Do we have any hands on Zoom?
There are no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, I'm going to close the public comment portion of the consent items and look to my council members. Councilmember Risto.
Thank you. I move to approve item 1 on the consent calendar, the minutes from the last meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, I'll roll call, please. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We need to roll call
Councilmember
vote.
Ennie? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Ms. Wood will do the roll call.
Councilmember Rista?
Aye.
Councilmember Ennie?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hudas?
Aye.
Mayor Badami?
Aye. Passes unanimously. The next item is verbal communications. Members of the public are welcome to address the committee only on matters listed on the agenda. I see no speaker cards. I see no one in attendance. Do we have any hands in Zoom?
There are no hands raised on Zoom.
All right, I am going to close verbal communications and move on to other business, which our first item is item number 2. Ms. Anbari, we're looking forward to your staff report.
Thank you. Good evening. Gatos, Finance Director. Item 2 contains the California Employer Pension Pre-Funding Trust called CEPPT, Strategy Market Value Summary Report for the period ending June 30th, 2024. And this trust, as of June 30th, 2024, had 2.1 almost 2.2 million, as noted in the staff report. I want to add that the Finance Commission has received this report on its September 9th regular meeting and recommended that the town move from the Strategy 2 to Strategy 1, the trust. If the Council would like to explore this option, staff will further analyze this option for a future discussion. Just wanted to add, and that's conclude our presentation, and I'm ready for questions.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember, was there previous council action or discussion of this item that suggested that we move the consideration until after the CAFR is completed?
Yes, and that's one part of the reason the staff is recommending this approach. In the last meeting in June, the Oversight Board meeting, that was the decision that we are going to discuss after the financial report is concluded. So
Okay.
what to do with the money.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, I don't. Are we looking for a motion on that?
There is no notion, it's just receive the report.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I would just like to make a comment. I sat through a lot of discussions at the Finance Commission meeting, and then we had the council consider similar item, different dates, I think. I think there were pretty strong recommendations at the Finance Commission, and I think some of it may have been lost in translation between the Finance Commission and the council. And I do think that there were some points raised that we really should consider. And we have some true investment experts on our Finance Commission, including an expert who teaches at Stanford and specializes in governments dealing with unfunded liabilities. And so in thinking about that, I was thinking maybe rather than consider it at the Finance Commission and consider it at the Council, we could do a joint meeting at some point to understand investment options and what the impacts would be, and have the Finance Commission and the OPEB board, which is, I guess, the council, meet together to discuss that after the CAFR. Is that something that we could do?
Katie Nomura, interim town manager. It's definitely something we could look into. We would coordinate with the mayor at the time and with the new town manager, and so we can look into that.
Okay, just offering it for an idea right now. We can certainly take that up. That would probably happen at which meeting? The consideration after the CAFR.
Since we bring the ACFR in the beginning of December and probably around the 20th of December, the second time, I would assume it would be sometimes in January.
Okay.
Would be more appropriate.
But the first time maybe would be the best time for the discussion, is that right? Or when would the OPEB board be meeting again to consider
The
this?
OPEB board meets in December as well, so I have to check the dates of that, and then if the ACFR was already received and final, then we can have the discussion.
Okay, thank you.
So I would just like to comment that the first council meeting in December is December 3rd, so I don't know if OPEB would be, or they would be meeting prior to December 3rd. And then the next subsequent meeting outside of the transition between mayor and vice mayor, which is the 10th, would be December 17th. So it looks like the earliest we might be doing this would be December 17th. Are we still good with that particular date?
I would recommend letting staff kind of, with all of this input, go back and discuss it with the new town manager when he comes on board to determine the best timing.
Okay,
Great, thank you.
thank you. All right, any other comments? All right, and no motion is needed. Comments are duly noted. We'll move on to item number 3.
Thank you. So the town has an additional trust, which for the town employer retiree benefit called the SERP Trust. And in that trust, as of June 30th, 2024, we had almost $27 million, as it's noted in the report. And that concludes that presentation. And if you have any question, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, questions, comments from council members? Seeing none. Shall I open public comment, or the fact that I already did verbal communications on items on the agenda?
Yes, sorry for not pointing that out. Yes, we should do it for each agenda item.
Okay, all right. So that being said, there's no speaker cards because there's nobody here in the audience. Are there any hands on Zoom that may have wanted to comment on item number 2 and on current item number 3?
No, the only member we have is our consultant.
Okay, thank you. All right, we will move on to item number 4.
Thank you. And I request the clerk that they promote our consultant, Doug Pryor from Foster and Foster. And Foster and Foster prepared the Los Gatos Retire Health Plan June 30th, 2023 actual evaluation. Those valuation is prepared every 2 years. And just telling that the Finance Commission received this presentation in its earlier meeting. It was a very good discussion. And so thank you, Mr. Pryor, and just to guide that presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here this evening. Hopefully you can hear me.
If you could speak up a little louder.
Okay, I'll try to do that. Is that better?
Somewhat better. Please proceed.
I'll try to speak up a little louder then. I'm going to run through the June 30, 23 actual evaluation report. Really, the purpose of this is to review the planned funding that the town is doing and kind of give recommendations for fiscal year 25 and 26 contributions. So if you could forward to the first slide. One more. So I want to talk a little bit about benefits. So an employee needs to retire directly from the town to be eligible. And you really have, in terms of benefits, two tiers. Employees hired before the dates that are listed there by employee group in that table have, the higher benefit tier. And then those hired after these dates have the lower benefit tier. In terms of what the benefits are, if you forward to the next slide. Thank you. So tier one, the town pays up to really the Kaiser employee premium plus 90% of the excess of the dual or family premium over the employee premium. That there is some variation depending on whether you retired before or after 2016, but that's the kind of the basic tier one benefit. Tier two in the bottom section there, the town participates in the CalPERS healthcare program, which has the acronym PEMCA, as you see there at the bottom. As part of participating in PEMCA, they require that any agency participating provide a minimum benefit to retirees. You can see that's called what we call the PEMCA minimum amount there. So the tier two benefit is $157 per month in 2024, the year we're in now. Kind of for perspective, if you looked at the tier one benefit for single coverage, that cap is $1,000 a month for single and higher for dual and family coverage. These benefits are payable over the retiree and spouse's lifetime. You go to the next slide, to slide 3. Yeah, so this might be a little hard to see, but just to kind of give you a little bit of perspective on that, in that graphic there, what you see is, and these are in thousands of dollars, what you've paid, what the town has paid towards for retiree medical benefits in the past, going back to really fiscal year 05, which was $136,000. These are the dark blue lines. As of 2023, it was a little over $1.5 million. And it wasn't in this table, but as of fiscal year 24, that number had grown to about $1.6 million. The numbers, the lighter bar above that is something called the implicit subsidy. I don't want to dig too far into the nuts and bolts of this, but there is an implicit subsidy benefit, which is really because retirees can pay a blended premium rate. So that's what that lighter bar represents. But in terms of checks, the town has paid for retirees about 1.5, 1.6 million in the last couple of years. You can move forward to slide 5. As of the far right column there, June 30, 2023, we included 149 employees in the valuation. As you can see there, again, upper right corner, you almost have as many tier 2 employees as tier 1 at this, as of that point in time. 81 tier 1, 68 tier 2 employees. 149 total employees, as I mentioned. You go to the following slide 6. What you see there in the upper right corner for June 30, 2023 is 150 retirees that are receiving a benefit from the town. That next row is there are 42 employees who retired from the town in the past that waived coverage. And to get a benefit, you need to be enrolled in a medical plan through the CalPERS program. 42 retirees did not do that. They're eligible to re-enroll in the future period. So that's why they're in these numbers here. But the bottom line here is you have almost as many retirees receiving the benefit as you did employees as of June 30 of 23. I talked about the benefits being paid to retirees recently and historically. Ultimately, what the town is doing through the trust is try to fund these benefits while people are employed so that the money is in the trust to pay them when they retire after they've left the town. In terms of the trust that you've set up, if you roll forward to slide 8, you're with the you're pre-funding with the CERBT, that's a CalPERS OPEB trust. They have 3 investment strategies listed out here, strategy 1, 2, 3. You can see here the long-term investment targets for each of those strategies. We just like to remind clients that they have those 3 strategies. The town is in strategy 1, which is the most aggressive, but at the same time, it's the most kind of traditional long-term generating return trust or strategy of the 3. We've done some survey of outside investment advisors, and based on that model, we believe a long-term return on this trust is appropriate to be set at 6.25%, which is essentially the discount rate being used in the valuation. If you move forward to slide 13, here are the market value of assets. These are in thousands of dollars. It's a June 30, 23 valuation, but we project stuff forward to June 30, 24, that far right-hand column, to determine what the contribution should be for the year after June 30, 24, basically 24, 25 fiscal year that we're in now. So what you see there is, as of June 30, 24, a little under $27 million in assets. Keep in mind the previous study was June 30, 2021. So, the last three columns are all kind of new information since that previous study. And of course, fiscal year 22 was a pretty difficult year investment-wise. Didn't matter too much what the investment mix was. If strategy 1, 2, or 3, you were in negative double digits on any of those. You had a negative 13.4% return for fiscal year 22. A little bit of bounce back in 23 at 6.4%. I'm on that bottom row there. Fiscal year 24, 11%. So as part of determining the contribution, rather than using this market value of assets, we use a actuarial value of assets that smooths these fluctuations out to try to stabilize your contribution somewhat. The actuarial value of assets is on the following slide here. If you go down to 14, so the actuarial value of assets, if you recall the previous slide, the market value of assets, June 30, 24 was about a little under 27 million. Here for actuarial value of assets, we're using about 27.3 million, that bottom row. You can see the ratio of actuarial to market value assets, they're really pretty close, right? 101%. Those numbers are really pretty close, but over the history of the plan, using this actuarial value of assets to determine contributions has stabilized your funding of this plan over time. If you can move forward to slide 17, you have the basic results of the valuation here. So you have three columns. The first, June 30, 21, the previous study. Second, June 30, 23, the current. And then what we're projected for June 30 of 2024. So you can see if you go to the middle section, we're kind of benchmarking the actual accrued liability with the assets. And you can see June 30, 21, you had unfunded, the difference of those two in that middle section, about $5.5 million. June 30, 23, that grown to about $7.5 million. The primary reason for that growth actually was expected higher premium increases in the future that we're anticipating. So that's really the main driver for that $5.5 million unfunded liability growing to $7.5 million. You can see as we projected that forward to June 30, 24, there's a little bit of a drop off. So you are projected to lower that to about 7.3 million. If you look at this in terms of what's the funded ratio, what's the ratio of the assets to the accrued liability, that information there is on the bottom section. You can see June 30, 21, it's a really big difference as to the funded ratio, whether we looked at actuarial or market value of assets. Actuarial value basis, we were using 81% funded. Market value is really 91% funded. So you switch over to the right side, what you see is the plan, whether you look at actuarial value, market value, is about 78, 79% funded as of the current valuation date. So if you jump forward then to page or slide 21, we'll get to kind of what does all this mean in terms of recommended contribution. So each valuation covers 2 fiscal years. So the two right-hand columns there are the 2 fiscal years in the current study. And what you see there is, so let me explain a little bit what goes into this actual determined contribution. So the actuaries break this up into really 2 components. You have the normal cost, which is the value of benefits accruing for active employees. So if all assumptions had always been met, you'd always contributed to the plan, you'd have no unfunded liability, and you just pay the cost of the benefits that are accruing for active employees. That's the normal cost. That's around $900,000, as you can see there, for 24-25. There's some administrative expenses, relatively a small piece. And then you have what UAAL is, that unfunded liability we're looking at earlier, of about $7.3 million. That's a payment to pay that down. And in this case, what we're using is about a 14-year period to pay off that unfunded liability. So all in, what that means is the recommended contribution would be about a little under $1.6 million for fiscal year 25, and about the same, a little lower actually in fiscal year 26. The reason that's dropping is because you're having the tier 2 people becoming more prominent as we go on. You can see that normal cost payment declines in the last 2 columns. So that's, the recommended contribution. And the idea here is to put that money into a trust so that, you're setting aside, as I said before, money for employees while they're working, so that once they retire, the trust has the funds to pay them in the future. And if you look at how this projects out, if we jump forward to slide 20, let's see, it would be slide, 25. We kind of project this out under a couple of scenarios. The first here is paying that full actual determined contribution each year. So the reality is, however you're pre-funding, first what you have to do is you have to make the benefit payments to the retirees. So if you look at the first row there, fiscal year 25, we projected for this year you'd pay about $1.7 million in what we call the pay-go cash cost. The portion of the premiums you're paying for retirees, that's about $1.7 million. You got to write those checks first, right? And then you have this implicit subsidy credit about $200,000. You have the third column there, a small admin cost. If you added those 3 up, that would exceed that actual determined contribution by $311,000, that trust item there, right? So to meet that actual determined contribution, since you're paying the retirees outside of the trust first, what you would do is then get reimbursed for those benefit payments in the amount of $311,000. And then the sum of those first 4 columns would get you to pay that full ADC. And you kind of see how that pans out over time in terms of more reimbursements coming through the trust over time as the benefit payments grow. So that's the projection. You can then see the far right-hand column, the trajectory you're on in terms of that funded ratio or funded percentage. As of 24, it was projected to be about 79%. You can see on this basis, you would pay down that unfunded liability and increase that funded percentage over a 10-year period. The funded percentage would grow from about 79% to a little under 90%. This is the pay the full actual determined contribution. The following slide, then, the town has not historically taken reimbursements from the trust. So in this scenario here, we're just showing what happens if no reimbursements taken from the trust. So what you see here is without that reimbursement, you're paying essentially $1.9 million. The total of the first 4 columns, $1.9 million is paid towards the benefits because you're not taking any trust reimbursement. You can see then the funded percentage there is projected to get over 100% within a 10-year period. So this is, the previous slide was really kind of paying the full actual determined contribution, pay off that unfunded liability over a 14-year period. This one is, what if the town did what has been done in the past, which is not take a reimbursement from the trust? What's the cash outlay and how does the funded ratio go or project out over a 10-year period? So that's kind of the final slide I wanted to talk about. I wanted to cover really just the key points on the report. I may have run through that quickly. I was trying to do that, to keep your, to avoid taking up too much time, but I certainly would love to answer any questions you may have on anything I covered or anything you wanted me to talk about that I perhaps didn't cover.
Any questions from council members on the report? Vice Mayor?
I had a couple of questions. I'm becoming familiar with this and appreciate the way this is being presented, and it's, I think, an improvement for us in financial management. So thank you for doing this, and thank you, Finance Director, for doing this. The one, I had two questions. One is, we're using the term projected 6/30/24, and why is that a projected number? Because we're sitting in October now, and I guess the report was prepared in August. That was 2 months ago, but still, I'm just trying to understand why we're using a projected number for something
Yeah,
that's in the
so-
past.
Yeah, so at the time the report was put together, the CRBT, the trust, had not provided the financial statement through June 30, 24. What we did know, though, is we knew the return for the year, and we knew an estimated return. So we used 11% return to project the numbers. It turned out they earned 10.9%. So it is technically listed as a projection because that's what it was, and because we didn't have the actual assets at that point in time. But the difference between our projection and where the assets actually ended up is very, very, very minor difference.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council members? I see a hand up. Councilmember Rennie?
Thank you. I put up my virtual hand and my real hand just so it's easier to see.
Thank you.
My question is really about the assumptions, which you didn't really cover very much. I've been on council 10 years, and looking at this for a while, and looking back even before I started, it seems like there's always surprises on the downside to us, as you showed in 23. All of a sudden, our funded percentage went down because you said you decided we needed to charge that the premium costs went up, which wasn't predicted from before, right? So we had talked about this fund about 5 years ago, and we thought it would be in the 80s by now and kind of on a glide path, and all of a sudden we had a surprise on the downside, and we're a little bit behind where we are. So when we looked at the slide you just showed of us getting to funded percent, someone might say, well, we'd never want to go over 100% funded. Maybe we should slow down. But the thing that gives me pause is, how good are our assumptions? When's the next time we're going to get a surprise on the downside and drop us a few percent that we then have to pick up again?
Right.
Could talk a little bit about the assumptions.
Yeah. So, I mean, this may not give you much comfort, but I'll tell you, first of all, we certainly are making our best effort to have an accurate assumption here. There's not trying to be a bias either way, right? And one of the examples of that is that long-term investment return. We go out and we survey 8 outside investment advisors and get that information, and then put that into our model and determine what the long-term return assumption should be. So each of the assumptions is really based on our kind of our best estimate. In terms of this report, look, the experience here was a very minor. It's on page 18 of the report, where we really have a reconciliation of the liability and assets from the previous study. So off the top of my head, I certainly can't speak to the last 10 years or so, but I do know since the previous study, we really had a very minor deviation between what was expected and what actually occurred, to the tune of, I think the number is about $37,000 out of a $31 million liability. Okay, so there's that. We did, the reality is that we're certainly not geniuses, right? And there are going to be changes as we go along. Now, whether I really can't speak to ultimately whether there's been a trend over time of us of being on one side or the other. I do know in this study, as I said, we review our assumptions with each valuation. And one of the things that we looked at was that when we kind of reviewed the marketplace and where we expected premiums to go, that those increases that we had built in the previous study needed to be adjusted. So we increased those. That increased your liability about $2.1 million alone, just that assumption. So, we're constantly monitoring it and making adjustments to the assumptions as we think makes sense. But yeah, unfortunately, look, the reality is we can't, in no way we're going to be, right on that projection we looked at 10 years out. You're right. There's no way that's exactly how it's going to pan out. There's going to be changes. And I'm just saying we're not building in a bias either way. So that's really kind of our expectation. I can guarantee you it's going to be higher or lower than what we have in that projection 10 years from now, unfortunately.
Yeah, and my experience is, as always said, it's going to be lower by some amount. We never seem to have surprises on the upside.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one thing I will say is that, when the town started funding, I don't have a lot of history here, certainly off the top of my head. When the town started pre-funding this benefit with a trust back in fiscal year 09, the plan was to pay off the unfunded liability over a 30-year period. And what you have left now is about 14 years. And as you're seeing, the contributions are fairly stable. They're not increasing a ton. So, there's a lot more to it, of course, than that. But one observation is that the contributions from the original schedule seem to be kind of, I don't see big variations in the last two studies, certainly in terms of where the recommended contributions are expected to go. And you're still on track to pay off this unfunded liability over the original period that was intended back in 09.
And one of the reasons I sort of mention this is several years ago, our previous assistant town manager, who really drove a lot of this, his idea was we would get our funding up somewhere around a little over 80%, and we could back off which investment group we were into a more conservative one, putting it on a glide path, he called it, so there was less risk in it. I'm not sure that we want to do that, but that's always in the back of my head.
Yeah, yeah. It's part of the reason we always show those various investment options, right? With going more conservative in terms of those investment strategies is also going to mean you're going to generate less investment income long term, which is going to be higher contributions for the town, right? I mean, you're going to have to generate the money to pay the retirees through either contributions or investment return, right? And so going more conservative will limit volatility. But at the same time, that's going to ultimately a higher cost to the town, right? And we deal with a lot of that investment volatility through the asset smoothing, right? So, it's something as you get better funded, I think would consider at the current levels. It's not a red flag for us. I do agree, when you get to say plus 90%, that's probably the range where I typically would talk to clients about maybe, easing off the gas pedal a bit in terms of funding. But you're in the, slightly below 80%. So, I would say keep moving forward. And, we'll revisit it every 2 years. And to the extent you get up higher, it might be something to think about.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor.
I had a question on some of the fundamentals on slide 5, which has the participant statistics. And so could we maybe get clarification on what is Tier 1 and Tier 2, and whether we've had a dramatic shift in 2 years' time frame. Is that going to continue in the future, or do we add Tier 1 employees at all?
No, you will not add Tier 1 employees going forward. So Tier 1 and Tier 2 is describing the benefit level, which is summarized on slide 2. So Tier 1 employees are those that were hired in general before 2018. And they have that much higher benefit for single coverage. The town pays up to $1,000 essentially a month for Tier 1 employees when they retire. Tier 2, when they retire, will get that minimum benefit of $157 a month. So, again, the distinguishing factor here is Tier 1 are employees hired in general before 2018. So that group is not going to grow in the future. You can't add on to that group, and you're only going to see increases in the Tier 2 group as we go forward.
Okay, thank you. So that, in the future, that will just track with the number of hires that we make. Is that correct?
Yeah, with the number of new hires, right.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions at this time? Seeing none, I'm going to open public comment. Do we have any virtual hands raised on Zoom?
There's no members on Zoom.
All right, I'm going to close public comment. Back to my council members, if they have any other comments. Seeing none, I think we're ready for item number 5.
Thank you very much. Item number 5 is received a CARPER's Actuarial Evaluation Report as of June 30th, 2023 for the 3 units, the miscellaneous group, the safety group, and the safety PEPRA group. CARPER's prepared this actuarial evaluation every year, and the primary purpose of this report is just to determine what's the required employer contribution for the following fiscal year, which is fiscal year 2025-26. So the primary reason of this report is just determine the contribution. It's also assuming a different year-end return and puts the miscellaneous plan as a percentage of the funded ratio, and the current funded ratio for the miscellaneous plan is 75.3%. The safety plan is 68.1%, and the PEPRA safety plan is 87.1%. As you see from the staff report, there is a slight decrease in funded status prior year result because it was a little bit higher, for example, 70.9% for the miscellaneous plan. The additional information, of course, all of those reports has a lots of information. The CARPER's return for June 30th, 2024, 2023 was 5.8%, which is below the 6.8%. The preliminary return for June 30th, 2024 is 9.3%.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think the Vice Mayor wanted to say something.
Thank you. It would be helpful if you could direct us to what page you're referring to in the report when you're citing numbers. Thank you.
I'm sorry. It's just, it's my, so I would recommend to go to page 48 of the staff report. And when I looked at that staff report, I noticed that the table, the date should be June 30th, 2023 instead of June 30th, 2022 in that table. It's my fault, did not approving this report, but that page 48 of the report page. It's just a staff report itself, if you can find it.
Page 48 of the staff report?
Page 48 of the packet, and this is the staff report is page 2 of the staff report.
Okay, were you able to find that, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, it's just helpful if you don't mind giving us a page number.
Oh, absolutely.
No
I'm sorry. I should have said that because it's really just a summary of those couple of 100 pages of report. So let me repeat it. So it's June 30th, 2023 evaluation and the funded status of the different plan. 70.3%, 68.1%, and 87.1%. And we have in the narratives that it's a slight decrease compare what was in 2022 variation. And this concludes the presentation, and I am happy to answer any question. I know it's a big report, and if any question.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Questions from council members? I see none. I'm going to open public comment and ask if we have any virtual hands raised on Zoom.
There are no hands raised on Zoom.
I'm going to close public comment and go back to my council members if they want to conclude with any comments. Councilmember Isto?
Yeah, the only comment I want to make is, thanks staff and our consultant. A lot of this this is important for our financial future. It'll help us make decisions. There's a lot that's not under our control, but, I appreciate the check-in and, seeing how the percentages change and where our funding is going, and hopefully that will help us as we work with the Finance Commission to make some decisions on how we want to move forward with these funds. But
Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Ms. Angbari. We appreciate the reports tonight, and I believe that's going to conclude this meeting. So with that, this meeting's adjourned.